It was a gray Monday morning, the kind that made the city feel half asleep. Inside the Silver Spoon, the clinking of cutlery and soft jazz filled the air as the staff hurried to prepare for the day. The atmosphere was calm, until the front doors swung open. A tall man in a black tailored suit stepped inside, his polished shoes echoing across the marble floor. Instantly, the room fell silent. The chatter died, waiters froze, and even the manager's confident smile vanished. Everyone knew who it was. Mr. Richard Hale, the millionaire who owned half the buildings on that very street. To most people, he was a living legend. To those who worked in the restaurant, he was a storm waiting to strike. He always came alone, ordered the same breakfast, and left behind tension thicker than smoke. Rumor had it he'd gotten a waiter fired once just for forgetting a slice of lemon in his tea. His wealth was unmatched, but his heart, people whispered, was locked behind walls colder than the ice in his glass. That morning, as his shadow passed through the dining hall, Lila, the new waitress, stood behind the counter clutching a tray. It was her first day, and, unfortunately, her first customer was the one everyone dreaded. The head waitress, Nora, leaned close and whispered, "Be careful. He notices everything. Don't make eye contact unless you have to." Lila nodded, trying to steady her breathing. She had taken this job to help her sick mother, and losing it wasn't an option. Still, she couldn't help but feel a spark of curiosity. Why did everyone fear one man so much? When Richard sat at his usual corner table by the window, Lila gathered her courage and picked up the coffee pot. Her reflection trembled in the polished surface, but she whispered to herself, "You've faced worse, Lila. It's just coffee." As she walked toward him, every pair of eyes in the restaurant followed. The air grew heavy with anticipation, and with the faint, dangerous scent of challenge. That was the moment their lives were about to change forever. Richard Hale sat in his usual corner, by the wide window overlooking the busy street. Outside, people rushed to work, umbrellas open against the drizzle, but inside the Silver Spoon, time seemed to move slower, especially for Lila. Balancing a steaming cup of coffee on a small tray, she walked toward the man everyone else avoided. Her hands trembled slightly, the cup rattling against its saucer. She could feel dozens of eyes following her every step, coworkers peeking from behind counters, hoping she wouldn't mess up. Richard didn't even look up as she approached. He sat rigidly, scrolling through his phone, his expression as hard as marble. Lila stopped by his table, inhaled deeply, and placed the cup in front of him. But as she reached to adjust the napkin, her finger caught the edge of the tray. In an instant, the coffee tipped. Dark liquid splashed across the pristine white tablecloth, running toward his sleeve. The cup rolled and clattered onto the floor, shattering the silence. A few customers gasped. The manager's hand flew to his forehead. Someone whispered, "She's finished." Lila froze, her heart thudding so loud she could hear it. The world seemed to shrink until only Richard's face remained. Slowly, he looked up, eyes cold, sharp, and unreadable. Every second stretched endlessly. Then, before fear could silence her, she spoke, her voice small but steady. "I'm so sorry, sir. It's my first day, and I promise I'll make it right." Her words were simple, but there was something in them, honesty, vulnerability, and a quiet strength that caught him off guard. The millionaire stared at her, his lips parting slightly as if to scold her, but no words came. For a moment, something softened in his gaze. He finally exhaled and said quietly, "Just bring another cup." The staff blinked in disbelief. No shouting, no threats, nothing. As Lila hurried away to fix her mistake, Richard watched her go, the faintest trace of curiosity crossing his face. He couldn't explain it, but the trembling waitress had left a mark he couldn't ignore. The lunch rush had passed, and the Silver Spoon was unusually quiet. Sunlight poured through the tall windows, casting golden reflections on the polished floor. Most customers had left, and the staff finally began to relax. But Lila noticed that one man still sat in the corner, Mr. Richard Hale. He wasn't looking at his phone anymore. Instead, he stared absently out the window, his untouched cup of coffee slowly growing cold. Something about him looked different now, less intimidating, almost lonely. Lila hesitated behind the counter, watching him. She could have stayed away, like everyone else, but her heart wouldn't let her. She remembered the way his eyes had softened earlier, just for a second, when she had apologized. There was a story behind that silence, she could feel it. So, instead of walking past him, she picked up a clean napkin and a pen. On the napkin, she quickly drew a little smiling coffee cup and wrote beneath it, "Bad days don't last forever. Maybe your next coffee will be better." Her hands shook slightly as she placed the napkin beside him. "This one's on the house," she said gently, pouring him a fresh cup. "I promise it won't spill this time." Richard looked up, surprised. For a moment, he simply stared at the doodle, the uneven lines, the cheerful smile, the words written with kindness. Then, something unexpected happened. His lips curved, just barely, into a small, hesitant smile. "You know," he said after a pause, his voice quieter than anyone had ever heard it, "you're the first person who's said something kind to me in this place." Lila smiled back, her eyes warm. Maybe they just needed a reason to try. For the first time in years, Richard felt something stir inside him, a flicker of warmth, a memory of what it felt like to be seen not for his wealth, but for his humanity. Outside, the rain had stopped. Sunlight streamed through the glass, falling gently across the table where a millionaire and a waitress shared a simple, powerful moment of kindness. The next morning, the silver spoon was livelier than usual. The smell of freshly baked croissants filled the air, and the staff moved briskly between tables. But when the door opened and Richard Hale walked in, the chatter instantly quieted. Everyone expected the same cold, distant man, yet something was different. He wasn't wearing his usual dark suit. Instead, he wore a soft gray sweater and jeans. No phone in hand, no guarded expression. Just a man who looked lighter. The hostess blinked, unsure what to say. "Good morning, Mr. Hale. Your usual table." He nodded politely. "Only if Lila's working today." Every head turned toward the young waitress, who nearly dropped her tray in surprise. She approached cautiously, her heart racing. When she reached his table, he smiled, a genuine, warm smile that softened his entire face. "I wanted to thank you," he said, looking her in the eyes. "Yesterday, I realized something. I've been coming here for years, and not once did anyone talk to me like a person. I suppose I made it easy to be feared." Lila shook her head. "Maybe people were just afraid of being honest. Kindness takes courage sometimes." He chuckled softly. "And you have plenty of that." Then he leaned in slightly, his tone more personal. "You know, I used to come here every morning just to feel noticed. I have everything money can buy, but it doesn't fill the silence at home. It doesn't buy a smile." Her eyes softened. "Well, you've got one today," she said, nodding toward him with a gentle grin. For the first time in years, Richard felt human, not powerful, not feared, but simply seen. He called the manager over and said calmly, "I'd like to pay for every table's meal today." The restaurant went silent again, not from fear this time, but awe. Lila watched as surprise turned into gratitude around the room. That morning, kindness spread like sunlight, warm, quiet, and unstoppable. And Richard Hale, the man everyone once feared, began to change in ways no one could have imagined. A week had passed since that unforgettable morning at the Silver Spoon. The story of the millionaire who paid for everyone's meal had spread across the town like wildfire. People spoke about it with wonder, not because of the money, but because of the change they had witnessed in the man they once feared. Lila, meanwhile, returned to her routine, still smiling at the memory of Richard's quiet gratitude. She hadn't seen him since that day, but sometimes, when she served customers at his favorite corner table, she could almost feel his presence, calm and kind, like a new energy had filled the place. Then one morning, a delivery truck stopped in front of the restaurant. Two men came in carrying large boxes labeled, "From R. Hale." The staff gathered around as the manager opened them. Inside were brand new uniforms, elegant aprons embroidered with the silver spoon, gleaming kitchen tools, and a note resting on top. Lila picked it up carefully and read aloud. "Greater than, to the staff of the Silver Spoon, thank you for reminding me that real wealth isn't measured in numbers, but in hearts touched and kindness shared. A special thank you to the waitress who taught me that even a spilled cup of coffee can lead to something beautiful, Richard Hale." The room fell silent, then filled with smiles, laughter, and even a few tears. The same people who once whispered in fear of his name now spoke it with warmth and respect. Later that afternoon, Richard returned, not as a feared millionaire, but as a friend. He chatted with the staff, thanked the cooks, and shared a quiet moment with Lila. "You didn't just serve me coffee," he said softly. "You served me hope." Lila smiled, her eyes shining. Sometimes, hope just needs someone to hand it over the counter. From that day forward, the silver spoon became known not just for its food, but for the story that began with a mistake and ended with a miracle of kindness, a reminder that compassion has the power to transform even the coldest hearts.